OCD isn't about being neat. It's not about love and organisation. And it's definitely not a personality quirk. OCD is a battle between fear and relief. And it's exhausting. Now, let's start with the stereotypes, because OCD might be one of the most misused diagnoses in everyday language. You know, people think OCD is just being tidy, or liking things just right, or being a perfectionist. But OCD isn't a preference, it's not a habit, and it's not a personality trait. It's a cycle, a relentless cycle. Now, OCD, or to give its full name, obsessive compulsive disorder, that's a condition where intrusive thoughts create intense anxiety and compulsions temporarily relieve it. If you can imagine a mental loop, a loop in your mind, or if you can imagine a loop of obsession to anxiety to compulsion to relief to obsession, that's the endless cycle a person living with OCD goes through. And that does sound exhausting, just saying that. So to live with that, it's probably mentally exhausting. Now, obsessions are unwanted, intrusive thoughts, images, or fears. Compulsions are actions, physical or mental, done to reduce anxiety. Now here's the truth. People with OCD don't want these thoughts. They don't enjoy the rituals, and they're not choosing to behave this way. It's just their brain, and their brain being stuck in a loop of danger and relief. Now, OCD is not being clean. It's not being organised. It's also not being picky. And it's not something you can just stop doing. Now, people with OCD often use their fears that don't make logical sense, but their anxiety feels real, overwhelming, and very urgent. This isn't about logic, it's about fear. So the OCD experience, OCD shows up in many forms, not just the ones people joke about. It's a very serious condition. I've seen it in action with people I have worked with, and it must drive them crazy. And people who don't understand or are not empathetic to somebody with this condition, it must drive people mad. They think that they're a perfectionist and all them other buzzwords I've just used, but it must be tiring for the person. It really must be. I wouldn't know, and I wouldn't want to live with that condition. I think it'd drive me even more mad. So if anybody out there who lives with OCD, please, comment on this video, share your experience, what it's like on a daily basis, what things you wish didn't happen to you on a daily basis, what thoughts you have on a daily basis, and what rituals you have. The more people we have explaining the condition who actually live with it, it's more powerful than whatever I can do with this video. So please, if you can see this, if you can hear this, comment on your experience with living with OCD. If you're recently diagnosed, or if you've been living with it for years, please drop a comment so other people can find out, and maybe make it feel a little bit more normal, and to know that there's other people out there living with this condition, which sounds so mentally draining and obviously misunderstood by the large majority of society. Now, as I said, OCD shows up in many forms. It's not just the one people joke about. Contamination OCD, the fear of germs, illness, or spreading harm. Some people call it germaphobe. a different thing, but it can obviously be confused, as OCD is very confused. As a diagnosis now, people say that's what they're living with. Checking OCD, doors, appliances, locks. I think we've all had that time, like, have I locked the front door? Have I turned the washer off? Is the gas hob still on? Do I need to check it? We've all had them sort of thoughts, I think. Probably when we were laid in bed, or with 10 minutes down the road driving or walking or wherever, we've had that thought. Imagine doing that all the time. It must be draining. Intrusive thought OCD. Now, these are unwanted thoughts about harm, violence, or maybe even taboo subjects. These thoughts do not reflect who the person is. Now, again, anybody out there in the big wide world living with this sort of OCD, intrusive thoughts, again, share your experience, please. The more comments we get, the more experience we get from other people, the better we can try and understand this and help people moving forward. Then there's symmetry and just right OCD. Needs things, obviously says what it means. Needs things to feel balanced or correct. Relationship OCD. The constant doubt about love, loyalty, or compatibility. Again, probably one of those that obviously misunderstood, and everybody thinks it's negative behaviour or controlling or anything like that, or paranoia or anything like that. It's not. Like I say, many forms of OCD, and it sounds like a lot of them are very, very misunderstood conditions. And then there's pure O, primarily obsessed OCD. Compulsions that happen in the mind, rumination, reassurance seeking, mental checking. That just sounds draining. I hate to use the word draining, but it must be tiresome. And you bring in that endless loop all day, every day. It must be so hard to live with. And there is here that's something quite important. OCD isn't quirky. It's distressing. It's time consuming, and it takes over someone's entire day. And I can actually see that, and I can sympathise with that. Now, living with OCD, again, shout out to the audience. If you know anybody, or if you are living with OCD, please share your experience with that. We'd love to hear from you. Now, here's the part that people don't talk about enough. People with OCD can and do live full, meaningful lives. Not by eliminating every intrusive thought, but by learning how to respond to them differently. Now, here's a few things that I've researched and talked to people who I know who have OCD, and they've shared this with me, so I can share it with you. And they say they find this helpful. Now, reducing reassurance loops, not feeding the cycle of constant checking, and that might sound difficult for someone who has that version of OCD where you constantly trying to reduce that. That's going to be difficult, but it can be managed. As a friend of mine told me, he said it was hard at first, but he just tried to react differently to them sort of thoughts. Now, external structure, routines that reduce decision fatigue. Again, for someone with OCD who's stuck in a routine every single day, doing the same things every single day at the same time and that sort of thing, maybe try and reduce. Might be easy for me to say, but maybe try and reduce that sort of routine. Instead of it, maybe you have an hour by hour, how you do it in a day. Might even be minute by minute in extreme cases. But try think about okay, what happens if this isn't done by 8 o'clock? I need to be somewhere else, or I need to be doing something else at 8 o'clock. That must give you so much fatigue. So again, look into ways to, reduce that sort of stress. You don't need that as well as the condition you're living with. Now, mindful and present moment awareness. Not fighting the thoughts, but noticing them without engaging. So if you have a thought flash through your mind and it's a very intrusive one, now maybe just try to forget, or just try to breeze past it and stuff like that. Try not to try, like I said, the word says, try to be mindful of that thought and what your situation is and the environment you're in. And spoken about environments, a supportive environment, people who understand OCD can make a huge difference, even if it's just one friend or one colleague or one family member. The more people we can get on board with us and in his own personal lives with the condition. If you live with OCD, tell people what it's really like. Don't let them go to buzzwords and think that, have a very construed version of what it is in their own mind. Set the facts straight with them, what it's like living with the condition, and then people can understand it more. And if people don't like that information, what you tell them, or they think that you're lying, you're not your sort of people. And you need to find yourself, someone more understanding people. Now, OCD isn't about eliminating the fear. It's about learning that fear doesn't control your actions. Now, a friend once told me, OCD didn't make me dangerous, but it did make me terrified of being dangerous. Sounds like an Oscar Wilde quote or something. But if you think about it, it does make a lot of sense. They were terrified of becoming that dangerous person, what everybody thinks they were going to become. So he made every effort to try minimise the condition in himself, so he doesn't become that dangerous person. And after that conversation, it did hit me that because intrusive thoughts don't reflect someone's character. I mean, this friend who told me this story about him living with OCD, he's one of the nicest people I know. I thought he was just a very organised person. Then when he told me about it, I understand more perfectly. Then, like, okay, it must be tiring for him. That people and other people with OCD aren't controlling. They're just trying to feel safe with themselves, in their own surroundings and in their own lives. So we've got to be a bit more empathetic and supportive towards that. Now, if you are living with OCD, hear this message. Now, you're not weird. You're not broken. You're not your intrusive thoughts. You're a human being with a brain that's trying to protect you, just a little too aggressively. Now, this is Diagnosis Debunked. My name's Danny, and you, exactly how you are, belong here.